but the yearly billion plus dollar tax increases, and as we know with public transit, could be $3 billion being increased, tax increase in the next 10 hours in this building, continue to place undue and gross burden on the people of Illinois.
Illinois' fiscal year 2026 budget contains a slate of core investments in the future of our communities, including economic development, education, and healthcare. A few key highlights I'm very proud to share with all of you. We're growing our investments in education from childcare to K-12 to community colleges and universities.
The House just didn't cut enough. We're not going to get the budget under control when presently we're spending $2 trillion more in our federal budget every year, more than what we take in revenues. We got to cut more.
Governor Edgar, you have been a force for good for this state and someone that I admire and hold the deepest respect for. Whenever I have taken a new job in the course of my life, I have always looked for people whose service is worthy of emulating.
Well, I'm glad I lived long enough to have that many Democrats say such nice things about me. Thank you very much.
We have a lot of countries that use tariffs on us and use them viciously, actually, viciously. And if we didn't have the power to use tariffs on them, and instantly, not when you go back to Congress and try and get hundreds of people to agree on something, that would take months to get just one simple proclamation.
That's all just ahead in this week's edition of the Illinois Channel.
I think I can sum up our position very quickly and succinctly. You know how it's a bad budget? When it starts out with at least $1 billion of tax increases. Yet again, that's where we're headed. As a reminder, in Governor Pritzker's 6 years in office, he has increased state spending by 40%. There are very few households, very few families that have had their income increase 40% over that 6 years. These are Governor Pritzker's budgets. These are not Governor Rauner's, Governor Quinn's. Governor Pritzker's budget's 40% over 6 years. This type of undisciplined spending is unsustainable in the state of Illinois. This budget is no different yet again, and as we're working through it to find out what's in it, and we're getting amendments hour by hour. I think the biggest takeaway the citizens of Illinois should take is in less than 9 hours. There is no revenue bill filed yet. We were just in committee and couldn't get answers on what the revenue increases are. In less than 9 hours, in this day and age of supposed transparency, the Democrats are going to file over $1 billion in tax increases. The public are not going to see it until it's filed. They're going to pass it through the House and pass it through the Senate in less than 9 hours. That lack of transparency alone and that lack of being upfront with the people of Illinois should be more than enough reason for Governor Pritzker to veto that revenue bill and make the legislative Democrats act in a transparent manner with the people of Illinois. Some of the items in the budget that we have seen, even though we know there's going to be further amendments, other than at least $1 billion in tax increases, the governor is backtracking on multiple commitments. Going back on 2 years ago, he talked about $75 million increase yearly over the next 4 years to build up the early childhood education department. That's gone from this budget already, going back on his word. State of Illinois is going back on their word with adults with disabilities, cutting that funding. And also the recommendation, the request for special ed funding, not in this budget as well. We continue to have our promises to the community, to the disabled community, whether it's education or adults, ring hollow. We can and should do better. There's decreased funding for the Legislative Audit Commission. We're going to backtrack on our oversight. And it's going to impair our ability to carry out audits and studies and find waste, fraud, and abuse. What isn't in this budget? Property tax relief. Yet again, another budget, no property tax. And in fact, the little bit of property tax relief we had in last year's budget, we paused. We took it out. Amazing. No property tax relief, no humane funding for adults with developmental disabilities. Economic development in rural communities has been left behind. Meaningful investment in childcare for working families, no energy cost relief. With the summer spikes coming, that is not in this budget as well. While Governor Pritzker continues to seek exploding spending and shifting the burden on the Illinois families, Washington, D.C. is moving in the opposite direction, cutting taxes and delivering real relief for working people, seniors, and families. Whether you're gig workers, you're tipped workers, waitresses, they're delivering actual real tax relief to working people. Illinois, it's the opposite. More taxes, more tax burden. We've always said that this kind of spending isn't sustainable, but the yearly billion plus dollar tax increases, and as we know with public transit, could be $3 billion being increased, tax increase in the next 10 hours in this building, continue to place undue and gross burden on the people of Illinois. It's more spending, more taxes, fewer opportunities for people that are being squeezed. I will tell you this, you want a prediction? One prediction is the only bipartisanship you're going to see in this building today is opposition, is voting against this budget. The Republicans are standing strong in opposition to the continued tax increases. With that, I want to turn it over to our lead budgeteer, Chapin Rose.
Thanks, Senator. I think you summed it up very well. Look, you're on the clock. There is no revenue bill. They won't even tell you what it is. I mean, how many different ways I tried to ask that question in the committee, 20 minutes ago? What is the revenue? How do you get the number? They won't tell you. What does that tell you? It tells you everything you need to know, right? At the end of the day, you've got the Republican Party trying to help working people. And I mean, the leader just mentioned the gig workers, the baristas at Starbucks with tips, the overtime workers, the guy that has to work overtime, to put food on his kid's table. But the bill that passed the House also contained, child tax credit for families. It contains senior taxes for senior relief for senior citizens. I mean, and then you contrast that with Illinois, and it's just, we're taxing ourselves out of existence. I mean, listen, how $15 billion this has gone up in 6 years under Governor Pritzker. $15 billion. And his response, well, we're still dealing with like all this other things from 6 years. 6 years, $15 billion. Where does it end? It ends when everybody leaves Illinois because they've been crushed to death with this ever-increasing tax burden. And now here we are, literally hours away from the midnight deadline, and we don't have a final budget for you all to look at, for the people of Illinois to look at, and we don't know what the taxes are that they're going to impose on the people of Illinois. I mean, this is like, when does it end? Working people are being punished by this. I mean, you cannot live and put food on your kids' tables in this state because you're being crushed to death by this. And now here we are, they won't even tell you what's going to happen, in this budget yet. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say. It's just so, I mean, here we are again. We've part of a budget in a subject matter hearing, and it's going to get changed, and they're going to tell you this and tell you that. But as the leader said, my goodness, look at who's looking out for working people. It's not the Democrats. It's not the Democrats at all. And by the way, I think the leader predicted it, but while Governor Pritzker and his progressives are looking to soak Illinoisans, I'll bet you there ends up being bipartisan opposition to this, because the guys like Fred Crespo, who got thrown under the bus 2 weeks ago, he gets it. He knows this is bad for Illinois, and we'll see where this goes.
Senator, you open for questions?
We'll take a few questions. We are on the floor, so we'll just keep it to a few.
Senator Rose, you felt very strongly about the developmental disabilities. Can you explain kind of, what actually happened how that makes you feel?
Look, it should make everyone feel, I mean, our developmentally disabled friends and neighbors, and we all have them, through any modicum of ethic, religion, or anything else you subscribe to about trying to be a good person in life means we should help those folks. Okay, party doesn't matter, right? You should just do that. But so to get to $2 an hour, you need 40 million, you need 80 million bucks, okay? They're blowing 40 million of it on welcome centers. Okay, there's half of what's needed. But then this nonsense, cynical, and I mean cynical sleight of hand, where they tell you they're actually doing something when they're stripping away the hours of care. I mean, who looks you in the eye and says, I care, but then cuts the number of hours that are actually available to bathe, feed, toilet a fellow human being? I mean, it's just so cynical.
There was a little discussion about the 240 million member district projects. Were you guys offered an opportunity to provide input into getting money back for your districts for specific projects?
You know, I would say Senator Rose led our team in a lot of collaborative talks, going department by department, and investigating ways to save money in this budget. We came into this budget cycle fully intent on the state of Illinois living within its means. If there was ever a budget, no new taxes, let's live within existing revenues, this was it. I'm disappointed the Democrats cannot meet that moment. Having said that, no, there were no discussions from our part on that. Look, where those projects are there are Democrats and Republicans that live in those areas. I think the point that was being made in committee was, having a merit-based, what's the merit to it? But no, we were not a part of that.
The Democrats yesterday talked about, during the House committee last night, talked about a global intangible low tax income, so like a tax on global corporations. And I'm just wondering, what your thoughts were on that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I lost you at the beginning.
Yeah, so Democrats yesterday and like a House committee last night talked about putting in the revenue package a global intangible low tax income, so it's like a tax on global multinational corporations.
I have no doubt that they are looking for all different ways and all different types of taxes that they can sell. The reality is we haven't seen what's in the revenue bill. I think that's our point. The last 9 hours to go, and we still don't know what $1 billion, $1.5 billion are going to be in that bill. And more importantly, it's not about us. The people of Illinois don't know, and that's going to rush through 2 chambers over $1 billion in tax increases.
With the revenue package and not understanding all of the details of it, the line is saying there's no broad-based tax increases, but there seems to be several industries that are going to be hit in one way or another that we're not entirely sure exactly how that's going to work. If the broad population gets taxed, they can respond in elections, and we know businesses, industry often can go other routes, courtrooms, other opportunities. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on basing the revenue for this budget on something that is no doubt going to get pushed back, even if we find out about it a couple hours before the actual vote.
I would say, Cole, it depends on perspective in terms of what's broad-based, what's not broad-based, not defined by the governor. It's over $1 billion in tax increases. And you step back. Why is Illinois, since Governor Pritzker's been in office, in the bottom 5 in the nation in GDP growth percentage? Why is that? Why are we growing less than our neighboring states, anyone else in the Midwest? It's because this constant tax burden, we pick industry by industry, come up with a narrative, and it is harming job producers. And ultimately, that is harming Illinois families. So I know Senator Rose wants to add to that.
I just wanted to say one thing about the broad-based thing, okay? Again, this is one of these moments of cynical word choice, right? Everybody's energy bill is going up massively in a couple days, all right? There's no relief for ratepayers in this state. And in fact, Governor Pritzker, through all these different actions he's taken over the last 6 years, have actually raised those rates. So, taxes come in many forms, And I would submit to you, for a working family that's about to get hit with a 40% increase in their energy bill, that's a pretty damn big tax. And there's nothing in this budget that helps working families at all.
What are you guys gonna do with your $7,000 pay raise?
Is there, I'm not aware that that's in the budget, but again, we need to be focused on tax relief for working families.
We gotta go to the floor, they're doing what they're calling for us to the floor. We can keep answering questions, so we're gonna be here all night. If you guys wanna ask us on the floor, I can work with everybody.
All right, thank you.
We've known since as far back as January of this year that this is going to be an extremely difficult budget year due to a decrease in available revenues. The Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability warned us. The Governor's Office of Management and Budget confirmed it. Even Governor Pritzker himself, in his February budget address, made it crystal clear when he announced to the legislature, and I quote, "If you want more spending, you tell me where to cut," unquote. And yet here we are, on the verge of passing another record-breaking, unsustainable spending plan. You on the other side of the aisle are barreling ahead with blinders on, as if this budget crisis didn't even exist. You're ignoring every warning, and worse, ignoring the financial pain that every one of our constituents is dealing with right now. Illinois families already shoulder the heaviest overall tax burden in the entire 50 states. Property taxes are some of the highest in this nation, punishing homeowners year after year with skyrocketing assessments and little to no improvement in services to show for it. Retirees, many of whom spent their lives working and paying into this system, are being driven out of their homes. Working families are watching their budgets implode under tax bills that now rival their mortgage payments. And our young people, they're leaving this state in droves, fleeing to states where they can afford to build a better life without being punished for trying. As I mentioned, Illinois has the highest combined tax burden in America, higher than California, higher than New York, higher than New Jersey. We're number one on a list no state wants to sit on top of. And now, with this budget, we're going to make it worse. This budget offers zero relief to taxpayers, not a single provision to help homeowners, not one sentence to ease the burden on working families. Instead, Democrats continue to spend recklessly as if taxpayer dollars are monopoly money. When will it be enough? If you vote for this budget, you are endorsing a staggering increase in state spending under Governor Pritzker, an increase of $15 billion, 37% since he took office just 6 years ago. That money doesn't grow on trees, folks. It comes from your constituents' pockets, and they're not happy about it. Illinois families are begging for relief.
Senator, could you please bring your remarks to a close?
I'm wrapping up, Mr. President. Thank you. They're being taxed out of their homes, priced out of the market, and pushed out of their communities. Instead of hearing their cries, this budget tells them they don't matter, that they can keep paying more and just get over it. I will not support this betrayal of hardworking Illinoisans. And if you care about the people who sent you here, if you truly represent them, you'll vote no too. Enough is enough. It's time for this body to stand with taxpayers, not stand up against them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Wow.
this night just keeps getting more and more amazing. I can't. Oh, wait, hang on. I bet Donald Trump called the mayor of Chicago and asked him to tax everybody in Illinois. Can we get a confirmation? We'll call Steve Miller to say, yep, you gotta do this, Mr. Mayor, you gotta do it. Think about what you are doing. Think about it. Every mom who is late at work with a newborn at home, taxed. Every senior citizen who can't go out of the house, taxed. Think about that. Think about what it adds up to. I just did a little bit of research here on the old Google. 160 diapers per month for a newborn. Okay? That's about 4, maybe 6 boxes. You got $100 in diaper tax alone for that mom. Okay? We haven't got to the seniors. About the college kids. How about the college kid? How about the kid who stayed up till 4 a.m. driving pizzas to pay his own way to college because his dad died when he was 8th grade and his mom was a single mom? And now you're saying he's gonna have less deliveries to pay his way to college because people stop calling Grubhub or Uber or whatever? I mean, you guys are nuts. I mean, that's the end of the story. I said a minute ago, people are gonna send you packing. I am even more convinced that the people of Illinois will rise up in opposition to this. They will rise up, as they should.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.
Illinois' fiscal year 2026 budget contains a slate of core investments in the future of our communities, including economic development, education, and healthcare. A few key highlights I'm very proud to share with all of you. We're growing our investments in education from childcare to K-12 to community colleges and universities. We're continuing to reduce the burden of healthcare costs on 250,000 working families so far with our medical debt relief program. We're helping communities create shovel-ready sites for new homes and businesses with our Surplus to Success program. And we're improving our long-term fiscal health by shoring up our Tier 2 pensions with a $78 million reserve fund for the Social Security wage-based safe harbor. We're protecting our taxpayers and state workers from future shortfalls that could cost the state much more. Beyond the headlines, the budgetary process was not about horse trading or insider politics or partisan bickering. This budget was focused from start to finish on the people of Illinois. Our deliberations required compromise and tough decisions, especially in these uncertain and turbulent times. But we got the job done for the future of our state and for the well-being of Illinoisans. For the families who now can access high-quality childcare and preschool, we got the job done. For the workers who can now afford to get back to school to get a higher-paying job. For the main streets in small towns that are being revitalized by our economic and community development grants. For the vulnerable children that need the safety and care that a well-resourced child welfare system can provide. Those are the folks who this process is for. And I'm very proud to say that we delivered for them in this budget.
Last night, we approved a good budget for what will be a most challenging year. I applaud the governor for his leadership. The budget we adopted was very close to the budget the governor introduced a few months ago. And again, it is a responsible, balanced budget. I will tell you that I think when we look back on this period of time, Governor, the fact this is the longest sustained, responsible budgeting period in my lifetime. We have stayed the course, we have stayed true to that, all while investing in our values, education, healthcare, and economic opportunity for working families. So I'm proud to stand with you, Governor. I appreciate your leadership, appreciate the partnership among the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office in passing a good budget in a very difficult year. Governor?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Olivia.
This budget relied on a few one-time fixes you tried in the past to fix the structural deficit of 2020. Is that something that you're going to be looking to spend political capital on going forward, something a little bit more long-term so we don't have to do this every year with one time moving stuff around?
Well, I'd remind you, Olivia, that there are a lot of one-time expenditures that occur in a budget as well. And so what we tried to do was make sure that any one-time revenues that you're referring to really matched up with or, were diminishing of the one-time expenditures that we have to make. So we've gotten really much closer than ever before to balancing that structural deficit, to getting rid of the structural deficit. As you remember, when I came into office, we did a study in early 2019 that showed a structural deficit of $3.2 billion. And we have whittled away at that year after year after year. And the fact is that we're getting closer and closer. We've been, I think, prudent this year about making cuts to government where we thought we could, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts that we made, while at the same time addressing needs that we knew that we had to. One last thing, just to remind everybody about the state budget. As you know, there was an Edgar ramp put in back in the mid-90s to deal with pensions, right? It increases the amount that goes into pensions from the state budget roughly by $400 to $500 million a year. Add on top of that we have the evidence-based funding model that requires about $350 million, 300 to schools every single year in addition to the existing budget. So you start really $800 million in the hole, so to speak, as you're trying to balance the budget every year from year to year. And so we have that to take into account. So when people talk about increased spending from one year to another, you're already talking about $800 million, and there's more, interest and other factors that are, as we say, above the line. Yeah, hi, Isabel. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
You passed a budget, you passed Medicaid on this, PBM reform, on and on, but your community college bill didn't make it, cell phone ban in school stalled, township consolidation, cannabis equity, energy bill, et cetera. What happened?
You don't get everything done in 1 year. I think that maybe the Senate president would back me up on that, and lots of people in the General Assembly. Sometimes they spend 2 years, 4 years, 6 years trying to get something big done. I think we've been hyper successful at getting things done in a shorter period of time than are expected. I have said for a long time about the community college bill, for example, that this was introduced back when Andy Menard was Senator Menard, and years before he came to work for our administration. He was, I think, the Senate sponsor at one point. And so this is, years old and something that it takes a lot of work to get people together on. Energy, let's take that as an example. CEJA was about 1.5 years in the making, longer really if you take all the pre-work that was done, but 1.5 years in working groups to try to get all the various interests at the table and try to address their concerns in order to put together a package that everybody felt was going to address the problem that we had in the state. So things take sometimes longer than one session to get done.
One-on-one, taking the time to meet in small groups?
I don't know that that's possible. I met with an awful lot of members. I mean, I certainly can, continue to find time for people whenever they want. But no, I meet with an awful lot of organizations and individuals and enjoy those individual meetings. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 at a time, sometimes one, sometimes with whole caucuses. But it's important to me to have a good relationship, not only within the Democratic caucuses, but also on the other side of the aisle. Sometimes we don't agree on things, but it's good to have dialogue.
Governor, can you reflect on transit not getting across the finish line? And there was a proposal that was in the amendment yesterday that would have put a delivery fee on to fund transit across the whole state. Would you support something like that?
I didn't introduce the proposals that would have paid for the transit bill and didn't see them actually until all of you saw them maybe 1.5 days before they were introduced on the floor yesterday. I can say this, that we need transit reform. We need to make sure we're addressing the needs of commuters, and not just in the city of Chicago or in Cook County or in the collar counties, but all across the state. I think you've heard me say that every single time I've talked about transit, that the entire state relies upon transit, and so whatever solution we have has to address them. And I have to give some credit to the people who are working in those working groups, that they took that seriously, and there was a significant focus on the amount of money that would go to downstate transit systems. So I'll continue to work with them. We were not the leaders of that endeavor, but we were at the table listening and helping whenever we were asked to. And again, I think there's significant work that will need to be done over the summer and in the fall to make sure that it gets across the line.
Just to follow up though, you a few days ago talked about you would not support broad-based tax increases, and you were talking about sales and corporate and income, but a delivery tax, I mean, a lot of people get deliveries on Amazon or DoorDash, or, that would hit a lot of people. Would that fall into that category of a broad-based tax that you would not support?
Well, again, I think, when I think of the broad-based taxes in the state, I think of the largest, sources of tax revenue, and those are income tax, the individual income tax, the corporate income tax, the sales tax. I obviously want to make sure we're lowering, not raising taxes whenever we can. And so, again, I think the decisions that will get made at the working group table over the next bunch of months, and that'll get surfaced. I hope we'll get response. I hope Republicans will help. They have not helped so far with, what sources of revenue might help to address the transit challenges that, their communities, the Republicans that live in their areas, the Democrats that live in their communities, need them to step up to the plate too. Dan.
As things were wrapping up here in Springfield, federal prosecutors recommended a 12-and-a-half-year prison sentence for former Speaker Mike Madigan. They talked about the stain his record left on government, and in their filings they talked about the letters of support he received from current and former government officials that are still strong allies despite the evidence of his illegal conduct. And yet, here in Springfield, the House never held its promised hearings on ethics legislation, and what we saw from the Senate was a 11-hour proposal that appeared designed to address an issue that the Senate president had with his campaign finances of the state board of election, and would have allowed the lieutenant governor and others who are running for federal office to fundraise on session days outside of Sangamon County. Why weren't ethics a stronger priority this session, and why haven't things like a stronger revolving door provision and more transparency about what's spent on lobbying in Springfield, which are common across the country, why aren't those on the agenda here?
I think you're aware that nearly every year that I've been governor, we have addressed ethics. I talked about it a lot with regard, for example, to the utilities that have been accused in those cases that you're referring to. I think in 2020, in my State of the State speech, I talked about the fact that we're not going to let utility companies make decisions for the majority of people in the state of Illinois. They're not going to be the ones who are directing the legislation that addresses energy, but rather, that the voices of the people would be heard. And that happened. And indeed, we included within CJA ethics legislation. People don't pay a lot of attention to that. They think that ethics legislation has to sit as a separate thing, but actually within a lot of the major issues that we're addressing, we address ethics. So, I think that, once again, ethics hugely important to me. We try to address them whenever we can. We had a very busy session. There were, in fact, discussions with, with the chair of the committee in the House anyway about his ideas for this. So we're going to continue to address it wherever we can, and I don't think you can ever stop talking about how do you make sure that we have a corruption-free and an honest government.
But you talked about the corruption.
Yeah.
Illinois still has among the lowest credit rating in the country. Republicans say it's not Donald Trump's fault. Why are they wrong?
Oh, they're not wrong. Donald Trump didn't cause the problem that occurred before Donald Trump became president in 2017, rather. Illinois was already getting, I think, in the 20 years before I became governor, Illinois, I think, had 21 credit downgrades consistently, not a single credit upgrade. And 8 of those occurred during my predecessor's term. So, this has been a problem for many, many, many years. So I've never blamed the credit challenges that the state of Illinois has had on Donald Trump. I blame a lot of other things on Donald Trump. I mean, he has made it difficult for working families in Illinois, and now even worse than ever before as a result of the budget that he's proposing.
How does this budget help the state catch up with the rest of the country? We traditionally lag the country in economic rebound after a great recession, after COVID. So what in this budget is actually going to make us competitive?
I'm so glad you asked that question. As you know, Greg, I've made it a hallmark of our administration and worked very closely with the General Assembly to try to speed up economic growth in the state by making the kinds of investments that are required for us to leap ahead. Right? We are a traditional economy that's got a large agriculture sector, a large manufacturing sector. Those sectors hugely important, and we want to make sure we maintain those and grow those. But we also need to make sure we have some very high growth sectors that we're investing in, and that we're doing everything we can to make Illinois a welcoming state for businesses that want to move, whether they want to move from one place in the United States to another, or businesses that are outside of the country and want to move to the United States. So, example, the Surplus to Success program that is in the budget, that's a program where we're taking state-owned properties. We're talking about prisons that have been closed, facilities that have been owned but closed many years ago, that just sit idle and frankly rotting in their communities, and to try to either reform the properties themselves so that they're saleable and usable, or to tear down whatever's there and make sure that, we've got, because remember, these are properties that have utilities, they've got water, they've got power. These are all the things that a business is looking for often when they move to Illinois, and more of those properties available in great communities like Lincoln, the better off we are. And so that's an example, but I could go through many examples for you about how the General Assembly has introduced, and we've worked with them on this, incentives to bring businesses to the state. So that is something we work on all the time. I think great news for people in Illinois, in part, is that when there's a downturn, Illinois really doesn't suffer quite as much often as other places, in part because we have a very stable and quite diverse economy as compared to some other places. You see a state like, I don't know, I guess I'd pick Oklahoma, where they're dependent on oil and gas. And if the oil and gas economy is terrible, their state is in terrible shape. In Illinois, you can weather the storm in one industry or another because we have such a diverse economy. We want to continue that way, but also make investments in biotechnology and quantum technology and things that will, I think, leapfrog us ahead of other states. Mike.
Lawmakers approved a delay of the prohibition on the tax for the swipe fees. Why was that done? Is it because of the legal challenges that are happening right now for the interchange fees?
I think that's right. I think I can't tell you it was not my initiative, but I can say I think there were, this is still sitting in the courts. I think the uncertainty is probably why it was brought up, but I think it was only a 1 year, as I recall, 1 year push of the implementation date. So this will be something that will probably get resolved over the next year.
Can you talk about the bridge fund that was created? Because I know that's something unique instead of using the rainy day fund more. Why was that done?
Yeah, so the bridge fund is really, think about the challenges that we saw in February from the Trump administration, when all of a sudden the systems that operate Medicaid, the systems that operate Head Start, were shut down by DOGE or by the Trump administration. We don't exactly know who did it. But in that period of time, and they had intended to keep them shut off for some time, but the hue and cry from around the country, had them turn it back on. But that doesn't mean they're not going to come back at it. And so what we wanted to do is to have a bridge fund, for example, to deal with a situation like that. We've seen this kind of chaos out of the federal government that causes real dislocation for people, for working families in Illinois, and we want to try to keep those, level and available, those services for working families, and the bridge fund allows us to do that. Yeah, Jeremy.
Have said on any move to Arlington Heights would be contingent on legislation that would basically allow them to negotiate, property tax assessments with local municipalities. How would you feel about a plan like that? And are you aware of any legislation that passed through the spring session or in the final days of the spring session to that effect for the Bears?
I mean, as you know, just on a personal level, I would like them to stay in the city of Chicago. I think you know that. Having said that, this is a private business. They'll choose to do what they like. Yeah, there's legislation that I've seen. I don't think that anything, at least, not that I'm aware of anything passed that would address that right away. But I'm quite interested to make sure that not for the Bears, but for developments all across the state of Illinois, that we have available things like, this is not directed at the Bears, but star bonds, which is a great idea when implemented properly. And it is being implemented properly in Marion, Illinois right now, but we think that's something that should happen across the state. And there are other proposals like that that we're all kind of anticipating. Again, this is about making this a business-friendly, job-friendly state, and not specifically about the Bears. Yeah. We have a process in the state of Illinois. If you want to seek commutation or pardon, you go through a process. First, you apply through the Prisoner Review Board, and then the Prisoner Review Board makes a recommendation to the governor. They put together, though, during that process, and this is why it's so important, they put together a record where they're interviewing not only the incarcerated person, but also their family, if they have family or friends that speak on their behalf. The victims or the victims' families also are heard in that process, and record is kept of that and taken of that. And that whole record is put together. A recommendation is made by the Prisoner Review Board to me that includes that entire record, and I review the entire record when that happens. I have, as you know, had pardons and commutations, hundreds of them during the course of my administration, and every single one of them has involved that kind of a record.
Governor,
yeah.
Transit, RTA says they need money now. Is there enough time to be able to send them a bailout in veto session before they would have cuts to service on buses and trains and they would lay people off? Or do you think, in fact, a little chaos, service disruption might help both chambers agree on legislation?
I think the group should be working expeditiously to try to get to a conclusion on transit funding. I also would say that they'd have more money in their coffers if they hadn't spent money advertising here in Springfield to try to convince people of something that they really should be leaving to the legislators to decide. But the fact is that we need to address transit funding as fast as possible, and no doubt the legislators will be meeting over the course of the summer. Our office will be present in those and be helping in any way that we're asked to.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and Jeff Berkowitz joins us from Chicago. And Jeff, we are going to be talking about a number of significant subjects this week. But folks, before we get started, please give us a like. If you're watching us on video, on YouTube, I should say, give us a like and leave us a comment on any number of topics that we're going to be talking about. Give us your opinion. Jeff and I will both be reading that. And Jeff, one of the things that we are going to be starting off the conversation with is overnight, a federal court ruled that the use of tariffs by President Trump in his effort to renegotiate international trade is not legal, according to the court. You'll have more to say about that, but I want to start with the White House comment that was issued this morning as we tape this on May 29. And the comment by the White House is that foreign countries' non-reciprocal treatment of the United States has fueled America's historic and persistent trade deficits, and that these deficits have created a national emergency that have decimated American communities, left our workers behind, and weakened our defense industrial base. And It is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. And the phraseology here is critical, that national emergency, because I would argue the White House is trying to find some wiggle room, legal wiggle room, that they can justify the president's use of him inserting tariffs rather than the tariffs going through the federal Congress. Now, you have taken a look at the ruling by the court. I don't know that you've committed it all to memory, but from what you've seen, and I'll remind people that Jeff has a legal education, he is a reformed lawyer, but what is your legal analysis of what the court said? Yeah.
Well, not having digested all 50 pages of the opinion, I have gleaned from it that this opinion essentially says it's a 3-judge panel to start with. One of the judges appointed by President Reagan, another by President Obama, and a third by President Trump. So it's balanced, you could say, in terms of philosophy, and it's well thought out from a quick look. And what it examines is, does the 1977 legislation, federal legislation, that's when Jimmy Carter was president, and that is known as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, or IEPA, could say. Does that legislation give the power to the President of the United States, what the court called basically unbounded power, to pass, to issue, not to pass, because it's not legislation, I guess by executive order? Whatever he's doing here is the executive, Article 2 of the Constitution. Does that legislation, which comes from Article 1 of Congress, does that give this president the power to set tariffs basically on unlimited products for virtually every country in this world? That we're doing that. And the answer is a resounding no. That is, the legislation did not grant that power, so this really is unconstitutional legislation. I don't know if the court used those words. It certainly exceeded the bounds of the legislation that was passed in 1977. And in 1802, more than 200 years ago, the Supreme Court established in Marbury, the last word on everything comes from the judges who the courts said the Constitution provides for judicial review. This is judicial review, Terry. You can't say, oh, they're doing something wrong. You may have disagreed with the opinion, but it is the clear constitutional power of the courts to have the last word on legislation. And if they say this does not, number one, this exceeds the bounds of the legislation, or it's an unconstitutional act because it does exceed the bounds, it has to be dealt with.
I know you just
And
skimmed
unless that's
this, but
reversed by
you
the
didn't have
Supreme
time
Court.
to read what, a 50-page
Right.
judgment. Did you notice any conversation or anything, and maybe you just didn't have time to, about them talking about the president has the authority to act in case of an emergency, which the White House
yeah.
in the statement we read was using that
Right.
phrase?
Yeah, and basically it said, this is not an emergency. These deficits that he's saying are emergency, as he's been talking about, have been with us for a long time. It's not like something, if they're not fixed tomorrow, the country will fall apart. Some would say they never have to be fixed, okay? So I don't think, this court did not think, these 3 judges did not think that a case had been made that there was any kind of emergency that would justify this excessive interpretation of this legislation as granting him the power, the president of the power to make these really, really unlimited moves, unbounded moves.
It seems like a strong
course.
argument when you note that these are the policies that have been in effect that Trump is trying to change, but they've been in effect for years. And so it sound like a good argument by the court to say this isn't an emergency if something
Right.
has been going on for, frankly, decades, that it's not how we use the term emergency, as 9/11 was an emergency, something that came out of the blue. But obviously, the White House will be appealing that decision, so we'll have to see. I told Jeff off camera that when Trump was doing this, and I don't have the legal background Jeff has, but it did seem to me, does the president have the authority to be doing this on his own? So that was always kind of in the back of my mind in this tariff discussion, whether that was the legal case. Now, do you have any idea, and maybe you have no idea, it's okay, but when the White House would appeal this, can they do it on an emergency basis? Do you know what happens next? Just trying to advance this. What might we expect now? And earlier today, by the way, Kevin Hassert, economic advisor to the president, was saying they have 3 deals, trade deals, about to be announced. And so the leverage that Trump was using with tariffs was getting these countries to come to the table and renegotiate the tariffs they had on the United States and the restrictive policies they had that was keeping American products from being made or sold rather in their countries. So we'll have to see what this does. And the one last thing is we should also remember that Trump's tariffs, as they were enacted, were bringing in billions of dollars in new revenue to the U.S. Treasury. That would now stop. So, I mean, just part of what needs to be considered. But do you have any idea as far as an appeal and when that might happen?
Well, when this opinion came down, as you said, either yesterday afternoon or in the evening, so I'm sure counsel for the president took a very, very quick look and decided they would appeal. And usually you file first a notice of appeal with this court, and this would get appealed to what's known as the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. And there are 13 courts of appeals across the country, 1 through 11, and then the DC Circuit, and those are geographic divisions, 1 through 11 of the various states. We here, for instance, live in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And then what's known as the Fed Circuit, which most people know as dealing with intellectual property matters, patents and copyrights and trademarks, which is one of our few specialized courts. Everything else goes to, whether it's antitrust, whether it's securities, it goes to the court in this geographic jurisdiction, 1 through 11 or DC Circuit. But this Fed Circuit has the specialty of dealing with intellectual property, which I knew of, and now I know deals with these trade matters or customs matters. I think those are the 2 major, if only, matters that the Fed Circuit deals with. So it goes, they're appealing that, and they file a notice of appeal, obviously, and they will almost surely ask for a stay. And I think you would ask initially the court that issued the opinion, although I don't remember this and haven't done a lot of appellate work. I think they would initially ask, that is, the government would ask for a stay of the initial court that issued, and I don't think it's likely to be granted, and I don't think if they upheld, they might appeal the refusal to grant a stay, and I don't think that would be overturned. Number one, it's not.
Well, let's not get too far. The point is we don't know. They'll go through the process, and we'll have to follow up on that.
It takes a while. The short of it, the easy answer is this will take time for the stay to be decided and for the appeal. So I don't think, my prediction, this ain't going to be overturned anytime soon, and it will go to the Supreme Court.
And we'll see what happens. All right, I want to move along. Staying with economic issues, there's some breaking news that just came out a couple of minutes ago as we're taping this on the 29th, that the president invited Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, to the White House. And they said that they met and discussed economic developments, including for growth, employment, and inflation. The headline here is that Trump meets with Powell and tells him it's a mistake not to be lowering interest rates. And the president would be joined in that opinion by quite a lot of economists and CEOs of corporations. Powell has been resistant, says he wants to get more data, but we'll have to see what comes of this. But there is a chance, again, pushing for the economic stories that are going to be impacting the American people. Obviously, if the Fed lowers interest rates, not only does that help with credit card debt or borrowing money to buy a home or buy a car, but in the federal budget, the interest payments on the federal debt are now over $1 trillion. Lowering interest rates, if the Fed were to do that, would also save the federal government billions of dollars in interest payments. So we'll have to see what comes of that, but I wanted to pass that along.
Jerry, yeah, if I might say, the Federal Reserve historically does not usually look at things like, well, would this help the federal government to lower interest rates because they would help them on the budget? No, as you know, Terry, they look at what the Congress set out as the goals, the dual responsibilities, which is full employment. That's one responsibility for the Fed to look at. And I would call it price stability. They may have another word for it.
And price stability. So the bottom line
focus.
is you don't want to, we had this inflation under Biden. It's now come down to about 2.5% going from memory now. So it has come down a lot. That would be an argument by Powell to say, why should we lower interest rates? On one hand, well, the supporters of the president would say, now that inflation has been beaten, why do you keep interest rates where they are now? Why don't you lower them? Because inflation has been beaten. However, what the president and the Congress is doing right now, which is to be passing along tax cuts, that's going to be stimulative to the economy. And I don't mean to get too deep in the woods, but I could see where Powell might argue, if I were arguing his case, them say, look, you guys are going to be doing a number of things that you yourselves argue are going to be raising the amount of growth in the economy. And so that could be inflationary. So we might want to just wait to see how things go along. But we'll have to see what happens on that. There's no clear answer.
One quick rejoinder to that is that, number one, I mean, the president himself has people going around his surrogates talking about how well the economy is doing in the short time Trump has been there, how strong the economy is. That doesn't argue. That'd be schizophrenic to then turn around and say, oh, but you know, the economy is really needs some stimulus, so we need to lower interest rates. So, you don't want to say that they're schizophrenic. So that's an argument.
To me, it's
against
not a
it.
clear-cut case, and you could
But the
argue
stronger,
both.
Terry, let me just finish
Go
for a
ahead.
second. 30 seconds. The stronger argument is, and the Fed has made this argument, we're not quite there in controlling what we knew was a 9% inflation just a few years ago due to the excessive policies of Biden. So we've lowered inflation, yes, but we're not quite there where we're sure it's done. So that's why we don't want to be premature in lowering interest rates and starting.
And for those who don't follow Federal Reserve policy, let me just point out very simply, when you raise the cost of borrowing by raising interest rates, it is like putting the brakes on the economy. And when you lower interest rates, it's putting your foot on the gas pedal. So that's just a simple way to kind of understand the impact of what the Federal Reserve policy would be on the economy. Trump is arguing, take your foot off the brake. We want to get this economy growing at a faster rate. And one of the big things that is a crisis, many would argue, is the national debt right now is at $37 trillion, where we are spending $1 trillion a year just in interest payments, money that is more than we are spending now on national defense. And so Kevin Hassert and the president and others would argue, if we get the economy growing at a faster rate than it has for the last several years, if we're getting the economy growing at 3% a year or 3.5%, Hastert said the second half of this year, 2025, we might be able to get it up if we pass the tax cut bill and some other regulatory reforms. We might have growth of 4%. That would generate wave of new revenue coming into the government that they could then be using if they chose to pay down the national debt. So that would give us more financial stability in the long run.
Right. The way to get financial stability is to do some cuts in spending that are reasonable, planned, and thoughtful. Things like cutting willy-nilly National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for Humanities. We care about those things, Terry. We don't want to waste funds, but we want to support those things that are historically and culturally important to this country. And Trump and Elon Musk, if he's when he's involved, should think about these things. Cut the waste, but don't cut out substantial programs that benefit and they're valued by people. And I've just mentioned a few by people throughout the country. Do these things in the regular order. Don't just say one day, oh, Elon Musk, I got a lot of money. I helped elect this president.
Jeff,
so I'm going to decide.
I don't want to
think
get too mired down, but I want to remind people that as we speak, or last week, I should say, the House of Representatives did pass the president's tax cut bill. They passed it by one vote, with the Republicans having such a slim majority, and there were a couple of Republicans that voted present. And so it was a one vote majority, 215 to 214. This bill is now in the U.S. Senate, and we'll have to see. That's what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. It is a huge part of the Trump agenda. And many Republicans say, look, we must pass this bill because if we don't, taxes are going to automatically go up next year if we don't extend the Trump tax cuts of 2017. And there's some additions to the Trump tax cuts of 2017. But just to remind people, and I apologize that this is not the clearest of graphics here, but this is some of the tax increases that you would incur. A married couple with 2 children earning $165,000 as a couple, their tax would go up $2,400, and a single parent earning $52,000 or more, $1,400. So the last thing the Republicans want to do is fail to pass the bill that is now in the Senate and have taxes go up next year. That's not the moniker they want, the tax-raising Republicans. But there are Republicans, Rand Paul of Kentucky is one, Ron Johnson, Rick Scott of Florida, who are saying, the House just didn't cut enough. We're not going to get the budget under control when presently we're spending $2 trillion more in our federal budget every year, more than what we take in revenues. We got to cut more. And many who are saying, look, we'll get there. Pass the tax cuts. We're going to come back and have more bites of the apple. We're going to have subsequent legislation that will be including some of the DOGE findings. And by the way, Elon Musk left yesterday. That was his last day working for DOGE. He's going back to run his businesses. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, will continue operations. And so we would presume they're going to be ferreting out more wasteful spending. So in the future, the Republicans are arguing here, saying, vote for this bill. Don't change it too much. We got to get it back through the House after you're making changes. They're saying don't change it too much because we just don't have any leeway on getting support in the House.
Well, and one thing to remind the senators you just mentioned, there's a very, very thin margin to pass legislation in the House. So they have to be very careful because they can't lose they can lose no more than 3 Republicans, I think. And if somebody's not there, they can lose no more than 1 or 2. And so the point is, these cuts that these folks just say, oh, we should cut. They ought to think about some of these programs are not wasteful. I mentioned National Endowment for the Humanities. Turns out the National Endowment for the Humanities gives out funds to keep 50 states that have, each state has an Illinois Council on the Humanities. These things are valued. They're not wasteful. They should be thought out. They have cut out programs that have been built out over years that are valued. So they should look at programs that aren't valued, that are wasteful, before they make cuts. And number one, not only is it good policy to do what I just said, it's good politics. because if the Republicans want to have their majority and increase it, they don't want to lose elections because they just cut willy-nilly and impaired and hurt a lot of people. You know, you can cut out the, you know, the federal Department of Education if it doesn't do well in terms of, say, helping kids learn how to read or setting policies that kids learn how
and
to
you know
read.
what people have noticed that, I mean, for all the money we spent on the U.S. Department of Education, test scores of students now are worse than they were 40-something years ago when the department was created. So they have, there's no, you got to make the argument, what are we gaining by having all this money spent? Maybe it would be better to take the money we're spending for all these bureaucrats in the Department of Education and send it back some tax reforms or tax revenues back to just local schools.
Or more to the point, and we'll keep this short, so I know it's not the main thing of the show, but it's so important that in Illinois, not just in Chicago, it's less than, it's about, it's something like 10 to 15% of the kids who are mainly minority at CPS read at grade level around the whole state of Illinois. When you go to Quincy, when you go to Bloomington, when you go to Decatur, around the whole state of Illinois, only 1 out of every 3 kids reads at grade level, I would say reads at all. And in fact, in the inner cities and the big cities across the country, that's true. This is a dramatic problem for the country. And we should allow the kids who are in failing public schools to take their money and go to a school that might teach them better how to read. And that would be a really good goal if you have a Department of Education to look at doing that, to providing exits from failing public schools, to getting the states to do more to offer school choice. 30 states in this country offer a program of school choice to some extent. Illinois just cut out its only program of choice.
Yeah, and other states are expanding school choice. That's something the Republicans, who are in a minority, you might say they're a super minority in Illinois, but certainly something they could be arguing, because it is inarguable that so many of the public schools, as we have in Chicago public school system, are just, the record shows they are doing a lousy job of getting kids educated. But Jeff, I want to get along before we run out of time here. One of the other issues that is being bantied about here and may lead to, apparently will lead to an investigation within the Congress, is who was running the White House during the Biden administration. We've had all these books come out of late with insiders within the White House being quoted by the authors of the book saying that Biden was out of it. He wasn't signing things. It was the auto pen. That he was clearly incapable of being the president and functioning. So we don't know who was really calling the shots. Let's take a look at something we got off of some of the videos off of TikTok here, where someone did a contrast of Joe Biden 9 years ago when he was vice president, and then what is compared to how he was acting as president. Let's take a listen.
Never, ever, ever, ever let their country down. Never.
Joe Biden looked very different just 9 years ago.
Easily. We never bow. We never bend. We never break.
Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look.
This fall off needs to be studied.
If we finally beat Medicare. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
So obviously, Jeff, and we all saw this, and it's kind of amazing that you get these people like Jake Tapper saying, man, we were misled by the White House that he was capable. I think it was pretty obvious to anyone who was watching and being observant that the president had problems. Now, there is a Democratic fundraiser who, Lindy Lee, and she was has really kind of turned against the Democratic Party because she saw what was going on behind the scenes, and she spoke in an interview. Let's listen to some of her comments about how there were insiders who were really the ones calling the shots in the White House.
That doctor. You know who the doctor was? Kevin O'Connor. This is a family business associate. He had a financial interest in propping up the Biden regime, and that is a fundamental problem here. People lied about his cognitive decline because they wanted power. Let's be perfectly honest about that. Exactly. Jill Biden, and I will name the names. Jill Biden, Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donilon, Anita Dunn, Anthony Bernal. These were Jeff Zients. These were the people running our country. We had a council of presidents for the past 4 years. We didn't have an elected president. We had these unelected hacks who understood that Biden was our final gravy train, that as soon as he went off into the sunset, they were done. So they wanted to drag us on for forever.
Well, Ms. Lee is exactly on point. There are people who surround him, the closest people, Jill Biden, his wife, okay? Anita Dunn, a close senior counselor for a long time to Biden and Obama. Those people should be looked at by the oversight committees in Congress, which should be a bipartisan look. If there are laws that were violated, if these people lied in a way that effectively did not carry out their fiduciary duties to the country, to have a person who really wasn't fit to be president, let alone run for president from the get-go. You've just seen this. You see that what he looked like when he was vice president, and he was attuned to things. I was a booster in some respects for Joe Biden then when he was Obama's vice president. But clearly by the time he was running in 2019, he was not with it. He should have never been supported by anybody, but least of all, when they knew that,
and yet, Jeff,
they should have dumped, excuse me, there's an amendment that makes it clear that the cabinet has the power working.
And the responsibility, the 26th Amendment.
To remove him.
And,
right.
and yet what were
the
they
hell
doing?
did
They
he
were
do?
going to run Joe Biden again, and they said that he was good to go for another 4 years when the man was never good to go, even in his first term.
Those people should be examined closely. They should be subpoenaed, they should be questioned, and if it's necessary, it should be referred to the DOJ for prosecution so this never happens again. Sometimes when somebody is in the cabinet and they sit there and they come out and say, oh, he runs circles, that person should be gotten. Just go get him. That cabinet officer had responsibilities and he or she did not execute them. It's time to carry out the
One last thing,
Constitution.
there is Jim Comer, the chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, has said he will be calling these people to testify, as you just said. And before we close out, I just want to say the other people that ought to be indicted in public opinion is the American media, because those at the White House, so many of those reporters knew what the situation was, and they were not exposing it. They were acting like Biden was on top of his game. But Jeff, look, we got to get out.
An explanation. I think we have 10 seconds.
Go.
Jake Tapper has real chutzpah. He was one of the media who was covering this up and criticizing people like the people who were calling it to the public's attention. And then he writes a book about it to make money about it. Write the damn book
As if it was his reporting that exposed it. When anyone said anything about Biden being incapable, Tapper criticized them. All right, we got to go, folks. Give us a thumbs up. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.
I had the privilege of first meeting Governor Edgar when I had the honor of serving as the executive director of then Governor-elect Pritzker's transition team. Governor Edgar served as the chair of that transition team, something in a role that he had filled for both governor-elects in the Republican and Democratic Party. And it was a very special opportunity for me to see firsthand Governor Edgar's love of state government. His belief that state government at its core and at its best serves everyone in Illinois. That it doesn't turn away from our most vulnerable in our society, in our communities, and that state government itself might not have the answer to all of the struggles that ail us, but it is an important partner and an effective tool in addressing some of the most serious challenges we have in our communities. It was a tremendous honor to get to see that up close in this role. I then went on, though, to learn about leadership as a Governor Edgar Fellow. I'm tremendously honored to be one of, I think, almost 500 people in the state of Illinois that can call themselves fellows and participants in the Governor Edgar Fellows Program. These 500 people are city council members, they're mayors, they're state legislators, and some of them go on to be congresspeople. But one of the most important things you learn as a Governor Edgar Fellow is about leadership and what leadership really looks like in today's society. The leadership is not about how many clicks you get, how many likes you get, or how many Twitter fights you might get into with other colleagues on either side of the aisle. The leadership is really about never giving up on finding common ground in all corners of our society and across all parties and ideologies. The compromise and negotiations is actually a very effective leadership tool to getting things done for all of our constituents. And that working together, and in fact bipartisanship, is something that is critical and something that as an elected official, you'll never regret trying to strive to achieve. And that is what I learned and I carry with me every day as I serve now in the United States House of Representatives. That leadership, that love of state government. And I can tell you in Washington, many other people would benefit from going through the Edgar Fellows Program.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I want you to know what a privilege it is for me as the current governor to be able to honor such an exemplary public servant, an Illinois legend, a truly good man who has served this state so incredibly well, Governor Jim Edgar. And also, as a side note, yes, he was Secretary of State too. But today, of course, we're honoring him in part because of that role, but of course the other title, as Bridget mentioned, as state librarian. Governor Edgar, you have been a force for good for this state and someone that I admire and hold the deepest respect for. Whenever I have taken a new job in the course of my life, I have always looked for people whose service is worthy of emulating. And sometimes it's a mentor who's willing to take me on as a mentee. Sometimes it's someone whose history and accomplishments I can study and try to understand what made them so successful. But when you become governor of Illinois, let's just say you have to be very choosy about which governor you want to emulate and what you want to emulate about them. But you don't have to look very far in this state to find one of the greats. It should tell you all you need to know about Jim Edgar, that he served with honor and integrity, and he emerged from this job with a continuing relentless passion for, well, upholding the political institutions that we all rely upon. Someone with seemingly unlimited energy to continue bettering them. When I was becoming governor, before I had been sworn in, I went to see Governor Edgar. He kindly invited me over to his home, and I sat down hoping that I would learn all the wisdom of the ages about how to be governor. And he said one really important thing to me. Now remember the moment, it was late 2018. He said, you really only have one critical job as governor of the state of Illinois, and that's pass a budget. You remember the moment we were in. We are, by the way, back in a moment 4 days from now. I'm looking at all the Republicans who no doubt will vote for the budget in 4 days that are here. But I still remember him admonishing me and telling me that you can't do this job if you're not prioritizing things through the way you put together a budget and then getting that budget passed. And it tells you something, once again, about his dedication to the state of Illinois, that he looked me in the eye, and very resolutely said, don't forget what your primary duty is.
Well, I'm glad I lived long enough to have that many Democrats say such nice things about me. Thank you very much. Also, I want to make a comment. Some of you were at an event about 4 weeks ago, the Edgar Fellows, and I had a hat on. And I said I wasn't ready yet my ego would not yet deal with my chemo hairline. Well, today I was getting ready to come over here and I thought, nah, it's time. It's time. So I left the hat in the car. But it dawned on me, the beautiful music we heard from the choir is the Laurel Methodist Church, where Brenda and I are members. And I have not been in church since we came back because I believe it's extremely impolite to wear a hat in church. Now they know that I do appear without a hat, and we're going to have to be in church come Sunday. And let me thank all of you here in the audience. As I look around this room, I see a lot of old friends, people who really deserve a lot of the credit that was being given to me by the speakers before me here today. It's great to see all of you. Theoretically, I'm not supposed to mingle in crowds yet because of my chemo, but I might mingle a little bit because looking out at this crowd, none of you can have anything that's going to hurt me, I'm sure. You know, I had the great opportunity to serve in a lot of different capacities in both the executive and legislative branch of government in more than my 30 years in state government. But there was no job that I enjoyed more than being state librarian. If you know anything about me, you know I love books. Brenda will tell you, I love books. I got books all over the house. She's scared to death that something's going to happen to me and she's going to be stuck with all those books. But I really enjoyed that role. And we are fortunate in Illinois. We have many fine local libraries as well as a state library. In fact, as I would travel the state, I would always evaluate towns and cities on how good their library was. If they had a good library, that was a good town. That was a good place to live because you had the support of the community, people were involved. So I love being a state librarian. I also realized that the state library was hid away in the Centennial Building. I mean, it was terrible. I went over there and I thought, this is not where it should be. And for years, there had been this plot of land that had been designated to be where the new library would be, but nothing ever happened. Nobody ever pushed the new library. It wasn't the right time. Well, about halfway through my 10 years as Secretary of State, State Librarian, Jim Thompson, who was governor, was doing one of his building programs. He did a lot of building programs. I thought, well, if he's going to go spend millions and billions, maybe I can get the library included. So, and the governor was very gracious. I went to see him, and he said, of course, we'll include the new state library in my new Build Illinois program. And as I started to leave, he said, oh, by the way, we're a little short on how we're going to pay for this new construction program I've got. And I've got an idea. We're going to charge sales tax on individuals who sell their cars to other people. At that point, you know, there were a lot of people, they'd sell 4 or 5 cars a year, they didn't have to pay any tax. They weren't a car dealer. But that was a lot of money that was kind of slipping away from the state. So he said, we need to cover that. And oh, by the way, you're going to collect it, which endeared me to a lot of people around the state. Well, the library, I got his support, and I got half of what you needed in Springfield at that time. The other half, I had to go talk to Speaker Madigan. Now, actually, Speaker Madigan was very gracious. He always came down to my office. Never said much, but he would come down to my office. I'd ask him for something. He'd sit there and kind of hit his paper. Never tell me if he was going to do it or not, but he would come to my office. And he came that day. He said, first thing he said, and this was a lot of conversation from Speaker Madigan. He said, who's going to design this library? He said, it's not going to be like that state building in Chicago. And I said, no, Governor Thompson is not going to design the new state library. I'm going to design the new state library, and it's going to fit into the rest of the state capitol. It's not going to look like the Attorney General building or the State Bar Association building, but it's going to look like the Centennial building and the Supreme Court and the Capitol. Well, I could tell I persuaded him on that. Then he said, well, how much is it going to cost? And I said, well, about $30 million. He said, oh, good. He says, you know, we're building a new library in Chicago, public library, so that means we get $30 million too. And I thought, great, I've got to go out and now raise $60 million. And I looked at him, I said, well, Mr. Speaker, no, I'm talking about building a state library. You're talking about building a local library. You understand that Chicago is a city within the state of Illinois. It's not on equal par with the state of Illinois. Now that's a concept I don't think I ever got across to Speaker Madigan. But fortunately, he didn't hold me to coming up with $30 million additional dollars. So we got the library built. Now, Governor Thompson was not real crazy about my design. He told me so. He said, that's really dull. And when it got built, we had him come over to speak. And as someone mentioned today, you'd have thought he designed the building in his speech. But he was very gracious. He said, no. He said, Secretary Edgar was right. I was wrong. This is the kind of building it should be. And this is the kind of building the State Library should be. This is a beautiful building. Some of you maybe have never been in here before. Walk around. If nothing else, be sure to see the staircases here. I came by yesterday just to make sure I knew where I was going today, and I forgot how beautiful these staircases are. They kind of get missed. The reading room, this whole building, I think, is one of the most beautiful buildings of government in the state of Illinois. Now, I'm very grateful for the honor today. I'm very grateful for what the kind words people had to say today. But I'm going to lecture a little bit. I don't get a chance to do this much anymore since I don't hold any governmental role. But then I can say whatever I want to say because I don't have to worry about the electorate. One word of advice I'm going to just mention, talking about this library, because we are in the closing days of the legislature, and I'm sure many of you have promises from many other people in this room they're going to take care of your issue. Don't forget to remind them. On this building, Governor Thompson, we're going to put the state library in the Build Illinois legislation. It's going to get done. The last night of the session, my legislative liaison, Mark Moselle, came and told Al Grossball, who was my Deputy Secretary of State, he said, it's not in the bill. It was the last night of the session. And so Al Grossball told me he had to go find Jim Riley, who was Thompson's main guy, who was one of my best friends. He couldn't find him that night. He was gone. So he told some person that worked for Jim Riley, and he said, I wasn't sure they were going to do it. Well, lo and behold, they did it. We got the state library. But what I want to remind you, don't think just because they told you a month ago they're going to do it. They might forget. So in the next 4 days, you better just check on the people who promised you they were going to do these things, because you might find on June 1st it's not in the bill, which is a terrible thing. But the most important thing I want to tell you today, make use of this beautiful building. This building ought to be, libraries are only good if people are in them. That's what a library is about, people. And we need to have people in this library all the time. There should be lectures here, there should be gatherings, there's some, but there could be a lot more to make use of this beautiful facility. And the most important thing is, unlock the front door. If you've ever tried to get in this library, I've tried many times, it's always locked. Got to come in this side door and sneak in. You think you're kind of coming in you're breaking in or something. That door ought to be unlocked at all times during the day and encouraged, because I think a lot of people come to that front door, they can't get in, they leave. We need them in here. We need them to make use of this beautiful facility. So that's my lecture for the day. Make use of this building. It's a beautiful building.
numbers have just come out, which are rather extraordinary, and I thought I'd play a tape of one of the people who I've respected over the years, from Joe Kiernan and Rick Santelli. This just came out, and we'll just play that for a second.
Personal income is up 0.8%. That is almost triple the expectations. I'll tell you that the income numbers, really, for the first 4 months of the year, they're stellar. They're really stellar. I mean, I could go back and look at the first 4 months of many different years. Really very strong numbers, and you're right. This administration is criticized for just about everything under the sun. I've never, ever in my lifetime had glimpses into the politics of an administration in the form of transparency like this one. Why don't we be, give credit where credit is due? Income really shooting up.
Rick, I also thought everybody was going to get one last order of imports that were going to be tariffed, and they were loading up on things. How the hell they already fix the trade, or not fix it, but to cut it in half? That's crazy. So there wasn't a lot of front loading of things that they needed before the tariffs hit?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it really does call into question some of the conventional wisdoms. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next month when we get this number, or we see some of the other numbers like current accounts, see how they fared. Because I don't know, I've been watching these numbers a long time. I don't think I've ever seen the trade deficit cut in half in 1 month.
Not bad. Right? Not bad.
Come on, guys.
Yeah. I see Howard and Scott are here, so it's great. You guys want to stand over here? You might as well. You're the ones that help produce those numbers, and it'll only get better. The tariffs are so important, and that's why we were so happy with the decision yesterday where the tariffs continue, because without the tariffs, our nation would be imperiled. We would really be imperiled. I think I can say that with great surety, Scott and Howard. And so we were very happy to get that decision, that big decision yesterday. And today it's about a man named Elon, and he's one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced. He stepped forward to put his very great talents into the service of our nation, and we appreciate it. And I just want to say that Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations. And you know the kinds of things that he's found and his people have found. He's brought a group of very smart people in, and they found things that are pretty unbelievable. I have to say that the numbers that we're talking about are substantial, but they're going to be very much more substantial with time, because many of the things that we're working on right now, we're going to have to remember Elon as we find them, but the numbers could double and triple because many things, we don't want to go out with them until we're sure, but we've found things that are unbelievably stupid and unbelievably bad. With the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon's delivered a colossal change in the old ways of doing business in Washington. Doge has installed geniuses with an engineering mindset and unbelievably talented people and computers. I actually asked Elon one time, what's their primary thing? And they have a lot of primary things, all having to do with being smart. But he said the thing that they're really the best at is working with computers, so that they can't be outsmarted by somebody that's not so honest, that happens to also be good with computers, but not as good as these people. But the mindset in the senior ranks of every federal department, and it's really changed. And with Elon's guidance, they're helping to detect fraud, slash waste, and modernize broken and outdated systems. So as you know, we're talking about various systems and changing systems. And, sadly, it takes a long time to do that. You'll change, let's say, a system at IRS and computerize it properly, where the job can be done in 1/10 the time, but it takes sometimes years to rebuild those systems. But we've started, in many cases, I will say that this has less to do with Elon, but the air traffic control systems, we're bidding out to the best companies in the world, those systems right now. They were what the previous administration was horrible what they did. They spent billions and billions of dollars, and in the end, it didn't even come close to working. They tried to hook up wire to copper, and it can't be done. and they just spent billions of dollars and just wasted money. Actually made the system much worse. So we're going to get a brand new modern system. Congress is working with us on that, and we're going to get it done as quickly as we can. But it's in the works, and once it's done, it'll be good for 30 years. But we have a system that's 48 years old and would have a modern computer hooked into a very outdated computer, and they don't hook up. I mean, they didn't hook up. So after spending billions of dollars, they turned on the system, and in never any cases, from local to countrywide, they never worked. More than 75,000 bureaucrats have voluntarily left their taxpayer-funded jobs to come out and really do the job. Countless wasteful and unnecessary contracts have been terminated, and you know that we have terminated many, many contracts, and many contracts, Elon, are right now being looked at, and it may be 6 months, it may be almost a year in some cases. We're going through procedures, we're going through courts, and we'll remember you as we announce billions of dollars of extra waste, fraud, and abuse. Just as an example, DOGE canceled $101 million for DEI contracts at the Department of Education, $101 million, and that was just a small section of the Department of Education. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City, and the landlord never made the kind of money that he made in the last short period of time. $59 million to a hotel in New York City, $45 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion scholarships in Burma. In Burma, does anyone know about Burma? $42 million for social and behavioral change in Uganda. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. I can say it's $2 billion to Stacey Abrams and her environmental movement. There was $100 in the account, and all of a sudden they found $2 billion in the account. And I assume that's being looked at. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I assume that's being looked at. Think of that, $2 billion. And then Lee will tell you there's another one over there for $20 billion being spent on another environmental credit. $20 billion, not 20 million, a lot, not 200,000, which is a lot. So think of it, in her case, you have $100, and now all of a sudden she gets hit with an infusion of $2 billion just before I take office. $20 million for Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. Nobody knows what that's all about. Nobody's been able to find it. $8 million for making mice transgender. So they spent $8 million on making mice transgender. And those are better than many of the others. I could sit here all day and read things just like that, but we have other things to do. So it's much, much more than just that. We're totally committed to making the DOGE cuts permanent and stopping much more of the waste in the months to come. We want to get our great, big, beautiful bill finished and done. After that, we put some of this into the bill, but most of it's going to come later. We're going to have it cauterized by Congress, affirmed by Congress. In some cases, we'll make cuts. In some cases, we'll just use it in a different layer to save the money. But it's hundreds of billions of dollars. DOGE has also fully modernized the federal retirement process and continues to work very hard on the IRS modernization. But we're taking that over with DOGE. Many of the DOGE people, Elon, are staying behind too, so they're not leaving. And Elon's really not leaving. He's going to be back and forth, I think. I have a feeling. It's his baby, and I think he's going to be doing a lot of things. But Elon's service to America has been without comparison in modern history. He's already running one of the most innovative car companies in the world. You look at his factories and compare them with some of the old factories we have, and it's a big difference. And the most successful space company, and I guess in history you would have to say the largest free speech platform on the internet, etc. Yet Elon willingly, with all of the success, he willingly accepted the outrageous abuse and slander and lies and attacks because he does love our country. I know that very much. He loves our country. He comes from another country, a country that's going through trials and tribulations, I would say. But he's all about the USA, and Americans owe him a great debt of gratitude. So I just want to thank Elon for his time as special government employee. Can you imagine? They called him an employee, but it's a special government employee, and for coming and helping us, and he really has changed the mindset of a lot of people. A lot of people thought, you know, maybe we'll cut 1% or 2% or 3%. Then they said, wow, we can cut a lot more than that. And we're going to do it very surgically. We're going to continue on the march. We're making America great again. When I was in Saudi Arabia, we were in, as you know, 3 really great countries, predominantly the 3. Qatar was great, UAE was great, Saudi Arabia, incredible. Like such an incredible experience to be in those 3 countries. But the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and I must tell you, the leaders, the great leaders of the other 2 that we just mentioned, they all said the same thing, that the United States is the hottest country right now anywhere in the world. And 6 months ago, we thought it was dead. It was like a dead country. And it would have been a dead country if we didn't have the right result on November 5th. It would have been a horrible, horrible situation was going on with the borders, with transgender for everyone, men playing in women's sports, and so much more. But they were saying the hottest country anywhere in the world. And then I played that little clip because I was one person who was respected, but there were 2 people, because Joe was in that one too. Joe's a good man. But that was one group of people saying something about the success of what we've done over the last 4 months. They cannot believe it. In the one case, they said they've never seen anything like it as long as they've been doing what they've been doing. They've been doing it for a long time. So I want to thank Elon for helping. And again, you know, the United States right now is the hottest country anywhere in the world. There's no country as hot. And we're doing really well. We came, when I left, we had no wars, we had no problems. We defeated ISIS, we rebuilt our military, and we had no inflation. And when I came back, we had a lot of inflation. We had wars all over the place. We had the embarrassment in Afghanistan, where we gave up billions and billions of dollars of military equipment, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, I believe. I believe that strongly. We have Russia with Ukraine. We had the attack in Israel in October, the horrible attack, October 7th. Horrible, horrible attack. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And now we have something where we're really healing a lot of that. We stopped India and Pakistan from fighting. I believe that could have turned out into a nuclear disaster. And I want to thank the leaders of India, the leaders of Pakistan, and I want to thank my people also. We talk trade. And we said we can't trade with people that are shooting at each other and potentially using nuclear weapons. And they're great leaders in those countries, and they understood, and they agreed. And that all stopped, and we're stopping others from fighting also, because ultimately we can fight better than anybody. We have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest leaders in the world. We put one of them in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as you know, General Raisin Kane. And we wiped out ISIS, completely wiped out ISIS in 3 weeks. They said it would take 5 years, and we did it in 3 weeks. And that's the way it is, but we don't want to have to use our military. We want to be peace through strength when we can, and that's the way we're going to have it. So I just want to thank Elon and all of his people. Most of those people are staying, almost all of them are staying, and they're going to be with us. And you're going to see the results coming long into the future. Even a year and 2 years later, you're going to see a lot of the results, and those hundreds of billions of dollars are going to be adding up, and they're going to continue to add. It'll be interesting, really interesting to see what the final number is going to be. But again, Elon gave an incredible service. Nobody like him, and he had to go through the slings and the arrows, which is a shame because he's an incredible patriot. The good news is that 90% of the country knows that, and they appreciate it, and they really appreciate what he did. And I gave him a little special something we have here.
Thank you.
A very special that I give to very special people. I have given it to some, but it goes to very special people, and I thought I'd give it to Elon as a presentation from our country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elon.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you. You see the lock. The lock on this is amazing.
Large lot.
Well, let me say perhaps a few words that this is not the end of Doge, but really the beginning. My time as a special government employee necessarily had to end. It was a limited time thing. It's 134 days, I believe, which ends in a few days. So, so that it comes with a time limit. But the Doge team will only grow stronger over time. The Doge influence will only grow stronger. It's I liken it to sort of Buddhism. It's like a way of life. So it is permeating throughout the government. And I'm confident that over time we will see $1 trillion of savings and a reduction in $1 trillion of waste and fraud reduction. The calculations of the Doge team thus far, in terms of an FY25 to FY26 delta, are over 160 billion, and that's climbing. We expect that number will probably go over 200 billion soon. So I think the Doge team is doing an incredible job. They're going to continue doing an incredible job, and I'll continue to be visiting here and be a friend and advisor to the president, and I look forward to times being back in this amazing room. By the way, isn't this incredible? Look at this incredible. It's stunning. I think the way that the Oval Office, how the president has just completely redone the Oval Office. It's beautiful. I love the gold on the ceiling.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's been there a long time. That was plaster. Nobody ever really saw it. They didn't know the eagle was up there. And we highlighted. It's essentially it's a landmark, a great landmark, and that's 24-karat gold. And everybody loved it. And now they all see it when they come in. So it's been good.
The Oval Office finally has the majesty that it deserves, thanks to the president. So I look forward to continuing to be a friend and advisor to the president, continuing to support the Doge team. And we are relentlessly pursuing $8 trillion in waste and fraud reductions, which will benefit the American taxpayer. That's it, really. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Right.
Great job.
Thank you, President Trump. The president mentioned that you had to deal with all the slings and arrows during your time at Doge. There's this
some of the people, some of the media organizations in this room were the slingers.
Well, so there is a New York Times report today that accuses you of blurring the line between.
It's the New York Times. Is that the same publication that got a Pulitzer Prize for false reporting on the Russiagate? Is it the same organization? I think it is. I think the judge just ruled against the New York Times for their lies about the Russiagate hoax, and that they might have to give back that Pulitzer Prize. That New York Times. Let's move on.
Okay.
Next question.
President Trump, Biden aides who used to work here are in talks with Republicans in Congress to go and testify about what they did or didn't do to possibly conceal President Biden's decline. Do you think that Dr. Jill Biden should also have to come in and testify about what she did or didn't do?
Well, I hate the concept of it. It's the wife of a man who was going through a lot of problems, and everybody that dealt with him understood that. And I guess it came out during the debate loud and clear. That was the biggest signal of all. They have to do what's right. The country was there was a lot of dishonesty in the election, as you know, 2020. That's been now caught. People understand it was a rigged election. And when you go further out, when you see the auto pen, I think the auto pen is going to become one of the great scandals of all time, because you have somebody operating it or a number of people operating. Because I knew Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't in favor of opening up borders, letting 21 million people into this from prisons and mental institutions and gang members. He wasn't into that at all. And who signed these orders, proclamations, and all of the different things that he signed that set our country so far back, that was so bad for our country?
With the auto pen, how would it work? Like, we're in the Oval Office right now. If there was a group of rogue staffers that worked for you who wanted to advance a bill or an executive order without your knowledge, how could they do it? How do they?
Well, it's very hard because I'd read your newspapers or your media the next day and I'd say, well, I didn't approve that, and I would find it. I mean, they wouldn't get away with it for long because I'd say, I never signed that. Who the hell signed that? Auto pens, to me, are used to sign letters to people because we get, I think they said 20,000 letters a week, and you like to be able, when somebody takes the time to write a letter, it's nice to sort of write back. And auto pens are meant for that. Auto pens are not meant to sign major proclamations or tax cuts or borders, anything having to do with the border, which is so important. And if it happened on my watch, I would be able to see it because the next day or sooner I'd be reading about something that I knew nothing about and who the hell signed this. So I almost never use the auto pen. In fact, yesterday I was signing about 81, I think it was 81 proclamations and statements to people that I think should be signed by us. I think when you write letters to foreign dignitaries or presidents or prime ministers, you should be signing those letters, not done with auto pens. I understand he signed almost everything with an auto pen. It's a very dangerous thing. It really means you're not president. Whoever operated the auto pen, and we think we know who that is, and it was actually more than one person, but that's not what the presidency is all about. I hardly use the
Mr.
auto pen.
President, on China. Reinstate the tariffs on China. You said that they violated the agreement with the U.S.
Well, they did. They violated a big part of the agreement we made. You know, if you read that whole statement, I was very nice to them. I helped them because they were in trouble with the stoppage of a massive amount of business. But I'm sure that I'll speak to President Xi and hopefully we'll work that out. But yeah, it's a violation of the agreement. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you give us an update to the latest ceasefire agreement that Israel has agreed to, but Hamas is still considering?
Well, they're very close to an agreement on Gaza, and we'll let you know about it during the day or maybe tomorrow, and we have a chance of that. And I think we have a chance of making a deal with Iran also. They don't want to be blown up. They would rather make a deal, and I think that could happen in the not too distant future. That would be a great thing if we could have a deal without bombs being dropped all over the Middle East. That would be a very good thing. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We want them to be safe. We want them to have a very, very successful nation. Let it be a great nation, but we can't have that. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. And I think we're fairly close to a deal with Iran.
Mr. Musk, a question for Elon.
Yeah, please.
You said just now that you look forward to being a friend and advisor to the president. So do you expect to continue advising the president and Doge informally, or are you going to sort of shift your focus entirely to your companies?
Well, I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
I mean, I expect to remain a friend and an advisor, and certainly if there's anything the president wants me to do, I'm at the president's service.
Mr. Musk, on Doge, you said that there was $1 trillion promise for cuts from.
Yes, I think we do expect over time to achieve the $1 trillion.
But what have you found in your time here was the biggest roadblock to getting those cuts? Was it the cabinet, or was it Congress, or something else? What was the biggest roadblock from your work?
It's mostly just a lot of hard work. It's really not any one person or Congress. It's going through really millions of line items and saying just each one of them makes sense or does not make sense. Obviously, at times when you cut expenses, those who are receiving the money, whether they're receiving that money legitimately or not, they do complain. And you're not going to hear someone confessing that they received money inappropriately. Never. They're going to always say that they received money appropriately for an important cause. Naturally, that's what you'd expect. So we just have to. It's just a lot of work going through the vast expenses of the federal government and just really asking questions. What's this money for? Are you sure it's actually being used well? Many times we can't even find anyone who defends it. So for a lot of the expenses, there is actually no defender at all. And then we have to just work through the process of stopping the spending, where there's often literally no defender. Nobody even knows why the money's being spent. It's truly absurd. I mean, we find situations where there are millions of software licenses with 0 people using them. 0. Exactly. This is the quizzical expression. You're like, surely, if there's millions of software licenses, someone should be using them. No, and then we've got to go through the process of saying, okay, look, if no one's using the software, we need to terminate this software license agreement. That's everywhere in the government, by the way.
Mr. Musk, what do you think would be easier, colonizing Mars or making the government efficient?
It's a tough call, but I think colonizing Mars and making life multiplanetary is harder. And as I said, we do expect to achieve over time the $1 trillion of savings. We can't do it in like a few months, but if you say by I think the official end of DOGE, which the president may choose to extend, is the middle of next year. If you say by the middle of next year, with the support of the president and Congress, could we achieve $1 trillion of savings? I think so. We're on track to do so.
On the big beautiful bill, would you like to see the Senate build in some support for your tariffs on the big beautiful bill, or should that be a standalone bill?
I have great support on the tariffs. I mean, I was so honored that we got that ridiculous stay lifted, because that would have taken away presidential power. It would have taken away everything that was granted by the founders. It would have been a terrible thing. And it would have, most importantly, would have left us vulnerable. We have a lot of countries that use tariffs on us and use them viciously, actually, viciously. And if we didn't have the power to use tariffs on them, and instantly, not when you go back to Congress and try and get hundreds of people to agree on something, that would take months to get just one simple proclamation. If we didn't have the power to counteract their powers, you wouldn't have a country left. We have to act fast. We have to be fast and nimble, as they say. And that was a really great moment, I think, yesterday when that stay was lifted. And hopefully now we'll go to court and just win that battle. Because if we don't have the power to do what they're doing to us, we are going to be a great nation no longer.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.